If you catch a 700-pound bluefin tuna at sea, don't rush to pull it onto the boat. Otherwise, it might end up cooking itself. This kind of fish has a very peculiar phenomenon. When it gets hooked, its violent struggle causes its body temperature to rise rapidly. The high heat spreads throughout the body via the bloodstream, and it can also cause muscle tissue breakdown. If not cooled properly, the meat can get cooked inside. Once the meat is damaged, its value drops drastically. So while cooling the fish in the water, you also need to drain its blood completely. After the temperature goes down, bring it on deck and clean out the guts. Once cleaned, fill the cavity with ice immediately. Only low temperature can ensure the meat stays fresh. A bluefin tuna this large doesn't have to be sold to middlemen, because there's a buyer from Tokyo who specializes in purchasing bluefin over 600 pounds and pays a much higher price than brokers. Let's see how much money Fat Brother can get for this fish. After cutting off the head and tail, the fish's net weight was 423 kilograms or 384 jin. Then came the process of slicing the meat. This tuna has a very high fat content, deeply marbled through the flesh, showing beautiful marbling patterns. The color and translucence of the core section are both excellent. Overall, this tuna is of very high quality. So the broker offered a unit price of $28 per pound, bringing the total value to $11,844. That's kind of good deal. Fat Brother and his team were very satisfied. Captain Brad also hooked a big one. Judging by the line tension, he estimated it to be around 500 pounds. They carefully maneuvered their rods, afraid of losing the fish. When they saw its shadow, he quickly threw the harpoon, then hooked the tail and tied it with a rope. To prevent the meat from overheating, they waited until nightfall. Before hauling the fish aboard, it was truly massive, measuring 103 inches in length, 51 0小时02分12秒 066大于0小时02分13秒 966, which is about 2.62 meters. Let's see how much this big fish is worth. After cutting off the head and tail, the fish's net weight was 509 pounds, or 462 jin. Then the broker began evaluating the meat. The flesh had a rich fat content, and the color looked pretty good. The core section was perfect, so the broker offered a unit price of $20 per pound. The fish sold for $10,180 in total, successfully breaking the $10,000 mark. If you spot a large number of seabirds diving into the water like cannonballs, it's very likely that bluefin tuna are nearby. Right after saying that, Fat Brother hooked another big fish. The main angler quickly ran to the stern. The dual-line reel was spinning so fast, it almost smoked. He had to keep enough tension on the line. If the line got too loose, the fish could easily shake the hook free during struggle. So the angler had to maintain just the right amount of force. When the fish is first hooked, it's full of energy. Fat Brother doesn't start the engine to fight against it. Instead, he lets it drag the boat, gradually wearing down its strength. 3 hours later, the big fish was slowly pulled to the stern. Fat Brother struck the final blow with a harpoon. At this point, the fish had no strength left to resist. He then took out a hook and rope and successfully tied the tail. They cooled it down in the water and hauled it onto the boat an hour later. This fish measured 84 inches long, not particularly huge, but if it's rich in fat, it can still fetch a high price. Let's see now how much Fat Brother's fish is worth. After cutting off the head and tail, the fish's net weight was 272 pounds. After weighing, they began slicing the meat. First, the color of the meat looked excellent, a beautiful and popular pinkish-red tone. But the fat content was not very rich. Fat was only found under the skin, not deeply marbled into the flesh. Though the clarity of the core part was quite good, 101 0小时04分18秒 766大于0小时04分21秒 533. After evaluation, the broker offered $19 per pound. This smaller tuna sold for a total of $5,168. Fat Brother was fairly satisfied with that price. Captain Bobo suddenly hooked a huge fish too. The fish he caught today was enormous. The angler could clearly feel the immense pulling force of the fish, and with bad weather on top of that, it took them 5 full hours to bring it to the stern. The exhausted fish finally surfaced. Paul picked up the harpoon for the final strike. The big fish completely lost its ability to resist, and they quickly tied its tail securely. After cooling it in the water for 2 hours, they hauled it aboard. From the looks of it, this was a massive fish. It measured 103 inches long. Such a large catch made Captain Paul very happy. Let's see how much this big fish is worth. After removing the head and tail, it weighed a net 469 pounds. The weight was excellent, but the quality of the meat matters more. Although this tuna had a decent fat content, there were many white tissues within the meat, indicating that the fish had health issues, which greatly reduced its market value. Fortunately, the meat color looked quite nice. The broker finally offered $9 per pound. This big fish sold for $4,221 in the end. A pity for such a large fish, but poor quality left no other choice. After a long wait, Taylor finally hooked a fish again. The two quickly ran to the deck to reel it in, afraid the big fish might escape. Otherwise, he'd be teased again for catching nothing. The weather was bad today, making reeling much harder. After 3 hours, the big fish finally surfaced. That meant it was running out of strength. After pulling it to the stern, Taylor quickly threw the harpoon. The wounded fish was still struggling. The siblings had a hard time, but eventually managed to tie its tail. After cooling, they pulled it onto the boat and measured its size. The fish was 91 inches long. Next, let's see if Taylor's catch this time can help him regain a bit of pride. 151 0小时06分44秒800大于0小时06分46秒066 After cutting off the head and tail, this tuna weighed a net 337 pounds. Then came the process of slicing the meat. Unfortunately, the fat content was quite low. The color of the meat was decent, but the core looked too pale. The broker wasn't impressed by this fish, so he only offered $9 per pound. The fish finally sold for $3,033. Looks like Taylor still needs more work to regain his pride. Captain Kane caught another big fish today. Everyone on board was thrilled. Because it was an expensive bluefin tuna, this tuna measured 102 inches in length. That's about 2.6 meters. If the fat content was rich and the color good enough, its value could easily exceed $10,000. They soon returned to the dock, ready to sell it to the broker. Let's see how much this big fish can sell for in total. After cutting off the head and tail, it weighed 505 pounds. That's about 458 jin. Next came the broker's meat inspection. The meat showed a beautiful pinkish red tone, but the fat content wasn't rich enough. The color and clarity of the core were both good. Overall, the quality of this bluefin tuna was of medium grade, so the broker offered $19 per pound. The total value of the fish was $9,595. Although it didn't break the $10,000 mark, the final price was still quite good. Captain Sean spent over 6 hours to bring a large fish to the stern. After such a long tug of war, the fish was completely exhausted. The captain seized the chance and struck the final blow with a harpoon. The worn-out fish obediently let its tail be tied. After 6 hours of struggle, the fish's body temperature was extremely high. It had to be cooled in the water for some time. Otherwise, the meat could easily be damaged. After cooling, they pulled it on deck for measurement. From its appearance, this tuna was both big and fat. Its length measured exactly 100 inches. Next up, 201 0小时09分01秒000大于0小时09分04秒166 Let's see how much Sean's big fish is worth. After cutting off the head and tail, the fish had a net weight of 476 pounds. Next, the broker began assessing the quality of the meat. Unfortunately, this tuna had a relatively low fat content. The color of the meat was acceptable, but the core transparency wasn't very good. Overall, the quality of this fish was poor. so the broker only offered $13 per pound. The total value of this fish came to $6,188. Captain Paul spent the night adrift at sea. At dawn, a fish suddenly took the bait. The two immediately got to work, reeling it in. The process lasted more than 4 hours. When they saw the shadow of the fish, Paul quickly grabbed the harpoon and struck it. Without much effort, they managed to tie its tail. After cooling it in the water for a while, they pulled it on deck to measure. This fish also measured exactly 100 inches long. Now let's see how much Paul's big fish is worth. In total, after removing the head and tail, it had a net weight of 468 pounds. This fish not only had a rich fat content, but also beautiful meat color. The core was a lovely pinkish red. Overall, this tuna was of above average quality, so the broker offered $25 per pound. The total value of this fish reached $11,700. Surprisingly, the usually low-key Captain Paul became today's winner. Meanwhile, Captain Kevin also returned to the dock. His fish ended up weighing a net 356 pounds. Then came the meat quality evaluation. This fish had a low fat content, and the color wasn't great, especially the core. It looked too pale. Even the captain himself shook his head at the quality. Still, the broker offered $14 per pound. Although the quality was poor, it still sold for $4,984. Taylor and his sister also caught a fish today. It didn't look very big, only about 83 inches long. After removing the head and tail, it weighed 264 pounds. Though it wasn't heavy, 251 0小时11分24秒 900大于0小时11分26秒 433 but its quality was excellent. The meat was rich in fat and had a beautiful color. The core's color and clarity were also outstanding, so the broker offered $27 per pound. This small fish surprisingly sold for $7,128. That price was far beyond the siblings' expectations. Right after Fat Brother cast his bait, the fishing rod immediately reacted, and judging by the pull, it wasn't an ordinary fish. To stop it from diving under the boat and cutting the line, Fat Brother quickly turned the bow around. He could feel it was huge, but he never expected that both the weight and value of this fish would exceed everyone's imagination. The fish was extremely strong, and the battle lasted a long time. 3 men took turns reeling. It took more than 7 hours before they finally saw its shadow. A crew member threw a harpoon and hit its gills. After 7 hours of struggle, the massive tuna was completely exhausted. It no longer had any strength to resist and obediently let them tie its tail. Catching such a huge bluefin tuna made everyone on board ecstatic. From its appearance alone, it was enormous. It measured an incredible 114 inches long. That's about 2.9 meters. A fish this big surely exceeded 600 pounds. It could even be taken to auction, but Fat Brother didn't want to sell it to the Tokyo buyer. He decided to return to the dock and find a broker instead. Even after removing the head and tail, the fish still weighed an astounding 795 pounds. That's extremely heavy. If the quality was good enough, it could fetch an exceptionally high price. The fat content of the meat was extremely high. It even made the flesh appear whitish. After being frozen overnight, it would turn into a beautiful pinkish red color. The core's color and clarity were both outstanding. Overall, this was a high-quality bluefin tuna, so the broker offered a price of 301 0小时13分30秒 200大于0小时13分31秒 766 at a high price of $32 per pound. This giant tuna finally sold for $25,440, a number other captains could only dream of. News of Fat Brother selling a fish for over $20,000 quickly spread throughout the fleet, leaving Taylor feeling frustrated. The siblings had been drifting at sea all day, without even seeing a shadow of a fish. Just as they thought they'd return empty-handed, one of the rods suddenly jerked. The two immediately got into action, reeling fast, hoping to get back to the dock before dark. Though Taylor's sister was a girl, she handled tuna fishing with great skill. In just over 2 hours, they pulled the big fish to the stern. Taylor threw the harpoon and struck its gills. The two easily tied its tail afterward. Their catch measured 87 inches in length. Let's see how much Taylor's fish is worth. The siblings returned to the dock just before the broker closed. After removing the head and tail, the fish weighed a net 284 pounds. Next came the meat inspection stage. Its fat content wasn't particularly high, but the color of the meat was beautiful, and the core had good color and clarity. So the broker offered $23 per pound. The small fish still earned Taylor $6,532. Captain Sean also brought a big fish to the stern. He seized the moment and struck the gills accurately. The big fish instantly lost all resistance and was easily tied by the tail. Their catch measured 90 inches in length. Let's see how much this fish is worth. After removing the head and tail, it had a net weight of 255 pounds. At 90 échelons, but only 255 pounds, meaning it was quite thin. As expected, the fat content was quite low. Fortunately, the color still looked good. After evaluation, the broker offered $17 per pound. The total value of the fish was $4,335. For a fish of this quality, $17 per pound wasn't a bad deal. Captain Paul and his crew were almost asleep at sea, when suddenly the rod at the stern bent hard. They ran excitedly to the deck to reel it in. But the main angler sensed something was off. The line tension wasn't that strong. If it wasn't a shark, it had to be a small tuna. Sure enough, when it reached the stern, it turned out to be a small 73-inch tuna. Paul had no choice but to cut the line and release it. At 73 échelons, bluefin tuna that size cannot be sold. Captain Jay also caught a big fish. It took both of them a lot of effort to bring it aboard. The fish looked large and fat and measured 95 inches in length. When you catch a big fish, you must sell it quickly. Let's see how much this one is worth. After removing the head and tail, the fish had a net weight of 405 pounds. Then the broker began assessing the meat. Its fat content was average, but the color was a beautiful pink-red, and the core had good transparency, so the broker offered $18 per pound, bringing the fish's total value to $7,290. A pretty good result overall. Meanwhile, Taylor caught another fish. This one also measured 87 inches. After removing the head and tail, it weighed 281 pounds. Then came the meat inspection. The fish wasn't very heavy and had little fat content. The only redeeming feature was its color. Overall, the quality was quite poor. So the broker offered only $12 per pound. In the end, the fish sold for $3,372. After waiting 8 hours at sea, Captain Sean's rod finally bent. The two held it tight, afraid the big fish would break free. But the clever fish swam under the boat. Starting the engine now would have cut the line with the propeller, so they had to wait patiently for it to swim away. Luckily, the line didn't snag. 3 hours later, the big fish was finally pulled to the stern. When tuna see humans, they struggle with all their remaining strength. If handled poorly, the line can snap, so it's best to harpoon the gills right away. The suffocating fish, 401 0小时18分17秒 500大于0小时18分19秒 900 quickly loses the ability to fight back. At that moment, they use a hook and rope to tie the tail. Catching a bluefin tuna usually takes a very long time. To ensure the freshness of the meat, after catching one, captains usually rush back to the dock to sell it. Today's catch looked quite large as well. It measured 99 inches in length. Let's see how much this fish will sell for. After removing the head and tail, it had a net weight of 427 pounds. At 99 inches, that means it was very fat. If the fat content was high enough, this fish would be worth quite a lot. Sure enough, the fish's fat content was very rich, and its color was a beautiful pinkish red. The core part was flawless. so the broker offered $26 per pound. The fish's final value was $11,102. The three of them hadn't expected such a high price. The broker really seemed quite fair. Before they could even leave, seagulls rushed in to peck at the meat. They were admittedly a bit wasteful. Several pounds of tuna meat ended up feeding the birds. If this were a Tokyo restaurant, the meat left on the bones would be carefully scraped off with a spoon. Not a single bit would go to waste. They'd even boil the bones into a pot of soup. Fat Brother also pulled a huge one to the stern. He hurled the harpoon forcefully, but only grazed the fish's body. The giant tuna kept struggling, but Fat Brother believed that brute force works wonders. The two of them managed to drag the fish up. Their partner quickly tied the tail with a rope, and they successfully secured the massive catch. To prevent the meat from overheating, Fat Brother chilled it in the water for 2 hours. The fish measured 96 inches long. Now let's see how much Fat Brother's fish will sell for. After removing the head and tail, it had a net weight of 345 pounds. Then came the meat evaluation. Its fat content was average, but the color looked decent. The core transparency wasn't very good. In the end, the broker offered $18 per pound, bringing the total sale to $6,210. Fat Brother knew himself that the fish's quality wasn't great, so the price was acceptable. Captain Todd also returned to port with a fish, but this one was small. After removing the head and tail, it weighed only 210 pounds. Not only was it light, it had very little fat. The only good thing was its nice color. So the broker offered $16 per pound. The small fish sold for $3,360. Meanwhile, young Jack also returned to the dock. His fish wasn't very big either. After removing head and tail, it weighed 268 pounds. The broker then began evaluating the meat. This fish had a decent fat content and a pleasant color. Overall, its quality was considered medium, so the broker offered $20 per pound, bringing the total value to $5,360. Every bluefin tuna differs in quality. High-quality ones fetch higher prices, while lower quality ones get much less. Captain Sean pulled another tuna onto the deck. This one measured 86 inches long. Let's see how much this one is worth. After removing the head and tail, it had a net weight of 282 pounds. Then came the meat inspection stage. Unfortunately, the fat content was extremely low, and the meat appeared dark red. The core's transparency wasn't great either. Overall, the fish's quality was poor, so the broker only offered $10 per pound. The total value of the fish came to $3,102. Although the price was low, the quality really wasn't good. So they couldn't complain. They could only hope for better luck next time. A 489-pound bluefin tuna once fetched a sky-high price of $1.8 million. Japan has the largest bluefin tuna consumer market. 501 0小时22分39秒 700大于0小时22分41秒 000 At Toyosu Market alone, thousands of bluefin tuna are auctioned every day. Of course, not every fish can fetch $1 million price. Those record-breaking sales are mostly hype. Their symbolic meaning outweighs their actual value. Since bluefin tuna are worth so much, how much are they really worth at the source? Fat Brother has been fishing for bluefin tuna for many years. Most of the tuna caught here are exported directly to Tokyo. After 4 hours of reeling in, they finally saw the shadow of the fish. They had to quickly spear it through the gills. Once it couldn't breathe, the fish quickly lost strength. Tying its tail with a rope meant the job was done. After cooling it in the water for a while, they pulled it onto the boat. The fish measured 91 inches long. Let's see how much Fat Brother's tuna will sell for. After removing the head and tail, it had a net weight of 360 pounds. Next came the meat inspection phase, which would determine the final value. The meat looked rich in fat, and its color was quite good. The transparency of the core was excellent. Overall, this fish was of good quality. so the broker offered $28 per pound. The total value came to $10,080. Fat Brother was clearly pleased with the price. Later that evening, Captain Todd hooked a big one. They managed to tie its tail before nightfall, and the fish was quite large. It measured 103 inches long. If the quality was good enough, it could easily fetch over $10,000. They rushed back before the broker closed shop and returned to the dock. Let's see how much this fish was worth. After removing the head and tail, it weighed 300 pounds. A 103-inch fish weighing only 300 pounds meant it was quite lean. Next came the meat evaluation. The fat content was moderate, but both the color and transparency were good. So the broker offered $20 per pound. The fish ultimately sold for $6,300. A pretty good result overall. Captain Kane also caught a big tuna, but this one wasn't just strong. It seemed smart too. It kept darting around non-stop, nearly snapping the line several times. It took 3 of them 5 hours to pull it to the stern, but it kept struggling fiercely. After a chaotic team effort, they finally tied its tail. The fish measured 95 inches long. Let's see how much Captain Kane's fish sold for. After removing the head and tail, it had a net weight of 369 pounds. The broker then began the evaluation. As you can see, the fat content was fairly good, and the color was a lovely pink-red. The core color and transparency were also fine, but this broker only offered $15 per pound. The total came to $5,535. From their expressions, you could tell they weren't happy with the offer at all. The Taylor siblings also caught a big one. It measured 96 inches long and looked quite fat. Let's see whether their fish could fetch a high price. After removing the head and tail, it weighed 434 pounds. A 96-inch fish weighing that much meant it was quite fatty. Indeed, the meat was rich in fat and beautifully colored. The transparency of the core was excellent, so the broker offered $24 per pound. The fish earned the siblings $10,416, breaking the $10,000 mark. Meanwhile, Sean also returned to the dock with a big fish. His fish measured 81 inches long, not particularly large. After removing the head and tail, it weighed 235 pounds, though not heavy. It was of high quality. The meat had rich fat content and a particularly beautiful color, so the broker offered $26 per pound. This small fish sold for $6,110. A pleasant surprise for the captain indeed. 601 0小时27分25秒 966大于0小时27分28秒 400. It seems choosing the right broker is crucial. Captain Charlie's fishing line suddenly snapped. Looks like he's hooked. Another big one. Yesterday he caught a 500-pound tuna that sold for over $10,000. Today's fish doesn't seem small either. He reeled in the line with his legs braced, still feeling the incredible strength of the fish. After 4 hours, the bluefin tuna was finally pulled to the stern. Exhausted, the big fish could no longer resist. The veteran captain grabbed his hook and easily snagged the fish's jaw. After cooling it down, they pulled it aboard. From its size, it was clearly a large one. It measured 101 inches long. Now, let's see how much this giant is worth today. After removing the head and tail, it weighed 448 pounds. Next, let's check its quality. Unfortunately, although it's huge, it wasn't very fatty. Luckily, the color of the meat was beautiful, and the core texture looked great, so the broker offered $15 per pound. The fish finally sold for $6,720. Though it didn't break $10,000, the final price was still quite acceptable. Captain Will's catch today was even larger. It took 3 people. Great effort to get it on deck. The fish measured 111 inches long. It definitely weighed over 500 pounds. Let's find out how much this giant fish is worth. After removing the head and tail, it weighed 609 pounds. That's about 552 caddies. Now let's examine the quality. The fat content was exceptionally rich. The color and core were both perfect. Overall, this fish was top-grade quality. So the broker offered $22 per pound. It sold for a total of $13,398. The captain was thrilled by such a high price and hugged the broker in excitement. Fat Brother's sonar kept beeping. Radar showed 3 fish following behind. Soon a big one jumped out of the water, and the fishing line snapped instantly. Using leg-braced reeling was fast and efficient. In less than 2 hours, they saw the shadow of the big fish. Fat Brother grabbed his harpoon and speared its head. The fish floated to the surface, no longer struggling. The 3 of them quickly used hooks and ropes to secure the fish. After cooling, they pulled it onto the boat. This fish measured 74 inches long. Now let's see how much this smaller fish is worth. After removing the head and tail, it weighed 228 pounds. Next came the meat inspection. Although not large, it had an excellent amount of fat. The meat color was beautiful, and there were no burn marks on the core. So the broker offered $22 per pound. The small fish sold for $5,016. The broker's offer this time was very fair indeed. Captain Britain spent the whole night fishing and finally caught one at 3 a.m. The fish measured 82 inches long. Let's see how much it was worth. After removing the head and tail, it had a net weight of 216 pounds. Then came the grading. The fat content wasn't very high, but the meat color and core looked decent. The overall quality was average. So the broker offered $18 per pound. The fish eventually sold for $3,888. Everyone was satisfied with the price. Captain Nick also brought one aboard. This fish measured 84 inches long. Let's see how much this one is worth. After removing the head and tail, it weighed 282 pounds. Then came the meat inspection. The fat content was moderate. The meat color was appealing, and the core clarity was good. So the broker offered $16 per pound. The fish sold for $4,512. They seemed quite satisfied with that rate. Captain Sean hooked 2 big fish at once. The crew grew tense because they weren't ordinary fish. They were valuable bluefin tuna. High-quality ones can fetch over $10,000. But hooking 2 at once isn't always good news, because the lines can easily tangle in the water. Otherwise, the fishing lines could get tangled together, and they'd end up losing both fish for nothing. So they focused on reeling in one line first to reduce the chance of the lines crossing. Soon, the first big fish was pulled to the stern. The crew threw a harpoon for the final strike and tied a rope around its tail, finally securing their first catch. Then they hurried to reel in the second line. But luck wasn't on their side this time. Just as the big fish reached the stern, it dove under the boat, and the propeller instantly cut the line. Their cooked duck had just flown away. The 3 could only sigh in frustration. Fortunately, they still had 1 fish left. This one measured 86 inches long. Let's see how much this bluefin tuna can sell for. After removing the head and tail, it had a net weight of 241 pounds. After weighing, the broker took a sample to assess the meat. The fat content and color of the meat would determine the price. Unfortunately, the fat content was just average, but the color looked decent. So the broker offered $14 per pound. The fish sold for $3,374. The price wasn't high, but still acceptable. Captain Paul also caught 2 fish, but they weren't hooked at the same time. So he managed to land them both, and his price per pound was much higher. Just as he was about to pack the first fish and return to port, the rod suddenly moved again. They immediately sprang into action and began reeling in the line. After 2.5 hours, they finally saw the shadow of the fish. Paul threw his harpoon, hitting it right in the gills, and tied the tail with ease. This fish was quite large. It measured 103 inches long. Now let's see how much Paul's 2 fish will sell for. After removing the heads and tails, They weighed 285 and 468 pounds respectively. Then the broker began assessing the meat quality. The first fish had low fat content, but the color was decent. So the broker offered $14 per pound. The fish was worth $3,990. The second fish had rich fat content and a beautiful color, so it got a $20 per pound offer. That big fish was worth $9,828. Together, Paul and his crew's two fish brought in a total of $13,818. Fat Brother also returned to port with a large fish. It didn't look very big. After removing the head and tail, it weighed just 283 pounds. Its value would depend entirely on meat quality. The fat content was not high, but the color was excellent. So the broker offered $15 per pound. Fat Brother sold it for $4,245. A fairly normal price. Bluefin tuna aren't easy to catch. Sometimes you go days without one bite. Captain Mike had been drifting at sea for 2 days, burning through bait after bait, until this evening, when his rod finally moved. For Captain Mike, it was an exhilarating moment. He even began to imagine that this fish could fetch $10,000, but reality often falls short of dreams. After over 2 hours of reeling it in, he realized it was clearly an immature fish, a small 73-inch bluefin tuna that isn't allowed to be caught. The captain reluctantly set down his harpoon. After all, they understood the need for conservation. Taylor's sonar finally started beeping, and soon the rod moved again. Taylor shouted for his sister to get up and reel in. Dark clouds in the distance signaled that a storm was approaching. Even after nightfall, they still hadn't seen the fish. They kept reeling for another hour in the rain. Just when they thought they had it, the fishing line suddenly snapped. An entire afternoon's effort was wasted. It looked like they'd be drifting all night again. Luckily, they hooked another fish the next day. This time, the siblings seized the chance and didn't let it escape the hook. 801 0小时37分03秒 866大于0小时37分05秒 466. After pulling the fish to the stern, the two worked together in sync and finally managed to tie its tail. After cooling it down, they hauled it aboard. This fish measured 84 inches in length. Let's see how much Taylor can sell it for. After removing the head and tail, it had a net weight of 391 pounds. Not bad at all. Next, they began assessing the meat quality. The meat had rich fat content, but the core section wasn't very clear. So the broker offered $20 per pound. The fish sold for $7,820. That's quite a decent result. A big fish dove under the boat just after being hooked. The captain worried the propeller might cut the line, so he quickly ordered the crew to turn the boat right. Recently, the price of southern bluefin tuna has surged. Losing a single fish means a huge loss. The captain could feel the powerful pull of the monster fish. He estimated it weighed around 500 caddies. But hooking it is only the beginning. Hauling a 500-pound tuna on board is no easy task. The fight with the fish is long and exhausting. They had to wear it down completely to bring it to the stern. To drain its last strength, they threw the harpoon the moment they saw its shadow. Only then could they weaken it enough. Then they took out the hook and rope and tied its tail. The captain initially thought it weighed about 500 caddies, but it turned out to be much fatter. Now it looked closer to 700 caddies. If such a fat fish has high-quality meat, it could be worth as much as $20,000. This fish measured 104 inches in length. Now let's find out how much this giant tuna is worth. This broker didn't remove the head or tail, so the whole fish weighed 805 pounds. That's about 365 kilograms. Next came the meat assessment. As expected, the fish had an incredibly rich fat layer. The meat felt oily to the touch and showed a beautiful pinkish hue. The clarity of the core was excellent. Overall, this was a top-grade specimen. So the broker offered $24 per pound. The fish sold for an astonishing $19,320. It became Captain Sean's biggest catch. Of the entire season, Taylor had been in great form lately. Today, he hooked two big fish at once and managed to reel both of them in. The entire process took over 7 hours. They finally brought them to the stern at dusk. Catching two fish simultaneously was exhausting, but their effort paid off. Both fish were hauled onto the deck. They measured 97 inches and 99 inches respectively. Let's see how much these two are worth. After removing the heads and tails, the first fish weighed 487 pounds. Next came the meat evaluation. Its fat content was at a medium level. The color was decent, but the shape uneven. The core clarity was good. The broker offered $16 per pound. The first fish sold for $7,800, a satisfying result. The second fish weighed 437 pounds. Its fat content was lower than the first one, and the core was less clear. The broker offered $13 per pound. The second fish sold for $5,681. Although both had modest prices, still, the total value reached $13,481. In total, Captain Paul also hooked something today, but what he caught were sharks, which had no commercial value to them. So they had to release them. He thought the day would end empty-handed, but around 3 p.m., he hooked a big fish. It took them 3 hours to bring it to the stern. Paul threw his harpoon, hitting the fish squarely. The weakened tuna was soon tied by the tail. After cooling it down, they brought it aboard. It also looked massive, measuring 101 inches long. Now let's see how much Paul's fish is worth. After removing the head and tail, it weighed 576 pounds. Then they began assessing the meat quality. This fish also had plenty of fat and a beautiful color. The clarity of the core was just right, so the broker offered $22 per pound. The fish sold for $12,672. Captain Paul was thrilled because lately, almost every fish he caught has exceeded $10,000.